Hello, my name is Rudescent. I'm a tank main. Been playing Overwatch since 2019, been tanking for the last 4 years, and with the recent blog post, I thought it would be a good idea to share my opinion on the current state of Overwatch as just someone who's very passionate about the game. This is gonna be a long video, so lay back and make yourself a tea. And I'm sorry for all the grammar mistakes. English is only my third language. Um, so first of all, I want to start off by saying thank you to Aaron Keller and the team for writing the blog post and sharing their vision with the community, because transparency, honesty, and open-mindedness were very refreshing actually. Frankly, when I heard about the blog post, I expected it to be a no, sorry guys, we believe in 5v5, so we don't even consider 6v6, but just said in the nicest way possible. So I was very pleasantly surprised to see the devs be willing to try things out. And trying things out is the best way to make the game better. And I feel like the team has been doing quite a good job of it lately, and I will talk about that a bit later. Talking about formats, I am quite neutral on this debate. On the fundamental level, I think formats themselves aren't much of a problem. I think whichever format it is, the issue is not the number of players, but the balance. I believe that 6v6 as a format never was an issue. It was a great format, and the reason why it became problematic is because of poor balance. People didn't enjoy tanks as much as other roles because the limited number of heroes you've had on tanks was even more limited because of the balance problems. Some characters in other roles made it really unfun to play certain tanks, which led to developing very boring metas. And I think if the Overwatch 1 team had patched the game at the same rate as the Overwatch 2 team does, or maybe even at a faster and higher rate, then things like double shield wouldn't be much of a problem. Honestly, shout out to the current team for pulling out balance patches on a regular basis. They may not always be right with the direction of the changes they're making, but I'd rather have the meta shift every now and then rather than playing the same comp for months. People who vote for 6v6 usually are people who feel very nostalgic about the good old casual watch, and the majority of this population are tank mains who miss Ryan Zarya. However, as someone who started playing Overwatch right after role queue was introduced, I can assure you that Ryan Zarya combo was not in every game, and it wasn't even close. If you were a Ryan main and a ball enjoyer would enter the lobby, then you would be playing Ryan Ball or some other comps that wouldn't make sense, like Sigma Zarya or Hog and Ball Torture, and so on. If the developers would flip the switch now, I believe that besides optimization issues and long queue times, another massive problem would be generally rebalancing the game and tanks specifically. And talking about optimization, shout out to Aaron Keller for addressing the issue, because people don't think that it's much of a problem. However, Marvel Rivals came out and it's optimized horribly. I personally had a very hard time running the game while streaming, and I also wanted to check out a new game called Wuthering Waves, and I couldn't even freaking start it. And my PC isn't even that bad. I mean, I have a RTX 2060S, which is average or maybe even above average and supports the majority of modern games. And before you type something stupid in the comments saying, oh, it's your problems, just buy a better PC, lol, I'm sorry, but you're wrong. In my very humble and unasked opinion, modern gaming culture should be available to as many people as possible and not be blocked behind a paywall. And Overwatch throughout its history has actually been very great in terms of optimization. Okay, back to the main topic now. I was talking about the difficulties of rebalancing the game to 6v6 again. When Overwatch 2 came out, there wasn't too much of a difference. However, after 2 years, the game has changed a lot, and the ways how Overwatch 1 and Overwatch 2 are played are completely different. So many characters that have entered the roster would not fit the double tank 6v6 philosophy. Guys, can you imagine Mauga Zarya or Junker Queen Zarya or Mauga Diva or Ramatra Diva, or maybe even something more chaotic like Ball Doomfist? To tank players, that may be fun, But let's be honest and objective here. To everyone else, this is absolutely ridiculous and a nightmare to play against. As a tank player, this would be interesting for me to try, but knowing the fact that it would ruin other players' experience doesn't make it worth it. And this is another topic to cover, which I'm going to do a bit later. 5v5, in my opinion, really did solve some core issues. First and foremost, queue times. If you didn't read the blog post, here's a chart provided by Uncle Aaron that shows the difference between queue times in Overwatch 1 and Overwatch 2. And I believe that those are average statistics for all ranks and maybe even including quick play, because back then, if you had been a high rank player and wanted to play DPS, 7 minutes queue would have been a blessing, because 15 or even 20 minutes queues were normal. Imagine coming back tired from work, logging into the game and waiting 20 minutes to find a game that you would lose in 5 minutes. With Overwatch 2, maps have become better. To my mind, one of the reasons why Overwatch 1 felt boring to play sometimes was because of the one-sidedness of lots of maps. The new modes and maps provide more dynamic to the game. Another thing that 5v5 brought is skill expression. The game has become way faster, more dynamic, and more FPS-like. If we conduct a survey, I'm pretty sure that the majority of people voting for 6v6 would be tank players, because tanking right now is a miserable experience, and playing DPS and support feels good in 5v5. They have much more freedom to move around the map, flank, take duels, and make plays on their own. So as we can see, the core difficulty with balancing whichever format is tanks. When I first read the blog post, I gave it a solid 9 out of 10. I absolutely appreciate the transparency and the shown willingness to make a better game for the community, and I really hope that the team will communicate with us more often, because when they are silent is when things go bad. The only reason why I didn't give it a 10 out of 10 is because I felt like they didn't address the experience of solo tanking in Overwatch 2. The only paragraph where this issue is mentioned is this. We mentioned the difficulty in balancing tanks for 6v6 earlier, but the past year and a half has shown us that there are issues with balancing tanks for 5v5 as well. For much of Overwatch 2, tanks have been fairly balanced, but when one of them becomes a powerful outlier like Mauga, that can be felt strongly in the world of one tank. Well, okay, but were tanks actually fairly balanced? I personally don't think so. In my opinion, counterpicking has become too much of a problem in the world of a solo tank. And I know that the game rewards flexible players, however, based on my experience, switching heroes after every death is just not fun. Because some tanks bring too much value compared to others, and it's just really difficult to be useful even on your best hero because you're being easily countered. There were too many matches where I would start the game with Ball, enemy Diva would make my hero completely useless, so I would swap to Zarya, and enemy tank would switch to Winston, and then I would switch to Winston, and then it would have become not the game where I enjoy playing my favorite heroes, but just miserable rock, paper, scissors. And that's one of the reasons why people don't enjoy playing tanks, and then speak about these formats, because you have too much responsibility. It's like you're an elder brother in a family of 5 kids, where you are forced to do stuff you don't enjoy to make everyone else happy. And if you're being an emo kid who wants to do their own stuff, then you're being trash talked by other siblings for throwing the game, and all of a sudden you're now playing Overwatch 3 where it's no 5v5 but 1v9. The latest patch that I personally call the World of Tanks, I hated a lot when it first came out, because to me it felt like it was a signal of ignorance of tanks' state. It didn't solve the 2 core problems I mentioned earlier, the counter-swapping and the psychological pressure. In actuality, it made those problems even worse, because for example, now that Zarya is even stronger, and the matchup against her, playing Diva is even worse, even more miserable. On top of that, if you're playing tanks, you are now expected to completely dominate the lobby, and if you're even slightly underperforming, people will start flaming you even faster. Sometimes I'm curious to check out small streamers on Twitch, and quite often I see duos of DPS and supports who will blame their tank every single match. I said that I hated the patch at first, but then I thought maybe this patch is just addressing the tank issue, but just in a cheap and a quick way. Because as a developer, you never know how the community of thousands of people would react to a certain change unless you actually put it into the game. I think they acknowledge the fact that tanks are unfun to play, so they wanted to check if people would feel more engaged in the role if it was overtuned. However, with all respect, I appreciate the experiment, but this was definitely a step into the wrong direction. As a tank main, Season 11 is the most unsatisfying time for me to play tanks. I never suffered from a lack of sustain of heroes I played. I never wanted my role to be raid bosses that would ruin other players' experience. Things I am suffering from are the lack of flexibility to counter-swapping and the stress from being blamed for every team's loss. The reason why I started playing tanks in the first place is because it was a role that was very open to people who weren't very great with their mechanics and liked to bring value with strategic thinking. At the start of the game, Ryan and Winston aren't mechanically demanding at all compared to some hit-count characters, for example. So I don't want to be spoon-fed with all the opportunities in the world to dominate lobbies. No, I want my role to be skillful, and I want to feel rewarded when I outplay my enemies with my big brain. Right now, I don't feel rewarded when I'm making a skillful play on ball, and 4 enemies are looking at me, who are by the way all counter picks, because well, even though I'm creating space for my team, they can't kill the enemy tank, and not necessarily because the tank is skilled, but because he's overtuned and is impossible to kill. And this experience is just miserable for absolutely everyone in the lobby. Tanks don't need more buffs, they need more tools. They need more nuance to their kit. And talking about the kit, I think that the current passives that tanks have don't make sense. Firstly, things like less headshot damage, less ult generation, and receiving more healing compared to other roles are not intuitive, and don't stop people from shooting giant moving aim targets, because it is satisfying to feel your shots hit something, and tanks are, well, very easy to hit. Secondly, you can't put everyone in the same frame. Some tanks benefit from the passives much more than others. For example, boop resistance is a huge deal for Winston, but not so much for D.Va. There either has to be no passives at all, or separate passives for every single hero, which take into account the nuances of heroes and would generally add more personality to characters and their playstyle. And thirdly, passives are not skill required and are just free benefit, which I don't think is fair. If I'm playing on Lijiang Tower and enemy Lucio goes for the sickest rollout in the history of Overwatch at the start of the round and boofs my entire team off the bridge, I should be out of the map too, because I didn't express my skill in any way to not be booped. I didn't press any buttons. I'm not getting booped just because I queued for tanks, and I don't think that's fair. Or Ana sleep. There are no reasons why I should sleep 2 seconds less than anyone else just because I'm playing tanks. Tanks don't need bigger numbers and free benefits. Zarya doesn't need bubbles longer than 2 seconds. D.Va doesn't need Matrix that lasts eternity. Ramatra doesn't need extra armor in his nemesis. Tanks need skill expression to deal with their counter picks. Here are some suggestions. This is just my opinion, and generally everything in this video is just my opinion, and you're free to disagree with it. So, crowd control is a big problem in Overwatch, especially for dive characters. We absolutely don't need CC immunity, that's for sure. But hear me out. What if Doomfist, during his block, had a parry mechanic? Basically, while you're blocking, you would be able to press a button that would block a debuff if you time it right. And the timing is very tight, like 0.2 seconds for example. It adds more depth and nuance since there would be more mind games. If you manage to parry, you're satisfied. If not, then you're punished with a crowd control. To my mind, that's completely fair. No one's mad when Ana hits asleep on the blading Genji, and even fewer people are mad when Genji deflects the sleep back into Ana, you know what I mean? I think the same parry mechanic should be added into Wrecking Ball's kit instead of being able to give shields to allies. When everyone focuses Ball, there are just no shields left for your teammates. And even if I do give my allies shields, I don't feel. That's the most important part. I don't feel any benefit from it, since it's not my experience anymore, but my teammates. Most of the time, I give my shields to my teammates after I dive. I come back to my team just to give them leftovers of my overhealth, which isn't very useful for them because by the time I'm back, the job is done and there are just no threats left. So replacing this ability with a parry mechanic would make more sense because Ball by design is a solo assassin type of character even though he is a tank. The other hero I've been playing a lot lately is Ramatra, and in terms of flexibility he suffers more than others. And the main problem is his shield. It regenerates 13 seconds, lasts only 3 seconds, and is the only ability that blocks crowd control. I think 3 seconds is absolutely fair, and 1000 HP on the shield is maybe too much. I think it could be 800 without any problems, but he sure as hell needs it on a shorter cooldown, at least 10 seconds, at least. Another thing with the shield that I'm absolutely mad about is the fact that it's not insta-deployable. I see completely no reason why I should not be rewarded for blocking a Rhine Shara. I'm playing in my main form since this is the only time when I can place my shield. Against a hero who's better at brawling, I'm ult-tracking him for the entire game. I'm reacting to his ultimate in time, I'm pressing my shield button, but I'm lying on the ground and only then I see my shield in front of my eyes because it takes 0.5 freaking seconds for the barrier to deploy. Blizzard, I beg you, make the shield insta-deployable. I'm crying for help. Please, just please do it. Another thing I don't understand with Ramatra is that he was presented as a soft counter to flying heroes, but in fact the height of the vortex is so low that it just doesn't matter. When Ramatra was coming out, I expected his vortex to reach the skybox, and I still can't see why it's not a thing. But it's fine, we can add more nuance to the character. Hear me out. It's the same vortex, but you can hold the input button for let's say 1.5 seconds max to give it extra 20% width and 100% height. So basically the height would be doubled. You can still miss it and mess everything up, but it opens up a window of opportunity. Those are the type of changes I would love to see for tanks that would suggest flexibility and outplayability if developers will end up with the 5v5 format. If it's 5v5, tanks need more tools to create space and have fun. If it's 6v6, the second tank would provide direct help to the first tank, which is also fine for me. To me, this blog post and the future of the game for the next couple of months is a big W and generally a win-win situation for everyone, since 5v5 enjoyers will still play the version of the game they like, and 6v6 lovers will get to play Ryan Zarya for a few days, and I think that will be a big day for Overwatch when that happens. Whatever the outcome of this will be, I encourage you guys to be respectful and rational, especially to other members of the community who debate on this topic, and developers. Everyone has different tastes, even within the developing team. In the history of mankind, there has never been such a time when 100% of the population was happy. This conversation is way more nuanced, so let's just chill the fuck out and enjoy the fact that devs are actually addressing the problems and are willing to try things out for us. You're free to share your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. I'm gonna go drink some water because I haven't talked so much in years, and like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Peace.